All right. Evening, everyone. Hope everyone's well. It's a nice rainy day here in South Alabama. It's overcast most of the day yesterday, but never really rained. But boy, it's rained today. They were predicting between 2 and 4 inches of rain today. I don't think we've gotten quite that much here at my house, but I know there's been some places to the west of us over in Mississippi that have had tornadoes today. So everyone, keep those folks in your prayers. Even a small, like an F1 tornado, can do a terrible amount of damage in a short period of time. I don't have a ton of experience with tornadoes, but I've seen a couple of them in my life, and they are, wow, what a powerful force of nature. We talked last week about Jesus calming the storm on the Sea of Galilee and the disciples' reaction to it. And, when we related that to storms in our lives and how to deal with them. But really, sometimes when these storms come up, it's quite surprising what they're actually capable of. So, again, anywhere where there's been tornadoes today, keep those folks in your prayers. Continue to pray for the Gleason and Turner families, those crowds. It's only been a week since they buried their 7-month-old daughter. Let's keep them in our prayers. Keep your local church in your prayers. I talked about it some last week. The local church is our greatest source, or one of our greatest sources of locating our joy and our faith. Not that it's rooted in those in the church, but it's rooted in Christ, obviously. But our joy, our faith, our strength often comes from being around other godly people. And so remember, the people are the church. The building is not the church. And so whatever community you're a part of, community of faith that you engage in, keep those people in your prayers. They love you, you love them, you need each other. And again, it helps to have people pray for you. This week, we're going to keep moving on in Mark. We'll start chapter 5. We're going to look at an account of an exorcism. And, it's not necessarily one of Mark's sandwiches because the story's not interrupted, but Mark is progressing through a series of stories to teach us lessons, right? He goes through and he gives quick accounts, and then he gives the parables. The parable of the sower, the parables of the kingdom, where you get some of the teaching about Jesus and the Christian life. And then Jesus calms the storm. And now we're going to see this week Jesus calm another kind of storm. Right? Now, this is an exorcism account, but that is a kind of storm in people's lives. I mean, I cannot imagine being possessed by an evil spirit and how that would ruin your life and shake you up internally to the point that you felt completely helpless. And that's another kind of storm we go through where Jesus can calm it. And we're going to look at that. Just as a preliminary thought, throughout history, some people may disagree with me on this, but just hear me out. Throughout history, demon possession seems to be a fairly uncommon thing. Okay? We read about it a lot in the gospel accounts. Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, Jesus casts out a lot of demons. But outside of that, there are no exorcisms recorded in the Old Testament. And very few exorcisms recorded throughout history outside of the period of time when Jesus was in his active earthly ministry. Now, some would say that's because there was no one else capable. I tend to think that it's a lot less common than what we saw in the times when Jesus was on earth, and I think there's a reason for that, which I'll explain in a minute. But even as you get into the book of Acts, there aren't a whole lot of demons being cast out in the book of Acts, right? And these are the apostles that it's recounting the lives of. I think that while Jesus was on earth, the spiritual world was shaken up, right? As if the devil and the demons knew Jesus was on earth, and they knew who he was. They knew he was the God-man. They knew the presence of Yahweh because they'd been in his presence before the fall, before their fall, and therefore, I think knowing that God was here, God with us, Satan stirred up trouble during that period of time, and so there were a lot more possessions. I think it remains uncommon today. I said last week that I think people give the devil too much credit. They try to blame the devil for everything, and I stand by that. I'm not saying there are not people possessed by demons or unclean spirits today. What I am saying is we are much too quick, I think, as a people, as evangelicals in America, to blame that, right? Your kid goes off to college and comes back after 2 years at 20 years old and tells you he's a homosexual. You want to say, oh, he's got a demon. No, that boy ain't got a demon. He got around weird people and new thoughts and ideas and got persuaded into something. He lost his foundation. He lost his grounding, right? I know that's not popular to say today. I'm sure, I don't know, YouTube may take this video down for me saying that. I don't care. Whatever. But the problem is rarely demon possession. I do think at least once in my life I've encountered someone that was possessed. I did not try to engage with the demon in any way. But I know people who have reported to me that they've been part of exorcisms. How true that is, I don't know. But I can tell you when real evil is around, you can sense it. You can feel it. You can discern it. And it exists. And so we should all be mindful of that. And just keep that in the back of our minds. Again, I don't think it's super common today. I don't think all illnesses, especially mental illnesses, are necessarily evil spirits. The human body's an amazing thing. It's strange, and we don't fully understand it yet. We're still trying to explain and figure out things about the human body. But I will say, God works in mysterious ways. His ways are above our ways. We don't understand them all the time, and so we should keep that in mind as we go through our lives. If you feel a call from God to become an exorcist, God bless you, and I wish you luck with it. I don't, but I think we can look at these exorcisms and learn from them. So we're going to be in Mark chapter 5. We're going to look at verses 1 through 20 today. And we'll read the text and we'll kind of go through it, and as usual, pick it apart, see what we can learn from it, see what we can glean out of it. My treatment of it probably is nowhere near as thorough as it could be, but I am trying to keep things moving. I don't want people to lose interest, so to speak, but I could spend a lot more time on this than what I'm going to today. So let's read our verses and we'll go from there. So Mark chapter 5, verses 1 through 20. And once again, I am in the Legacy Standard Bible, but whatever translation you have and read is fine with me as long as it's not, the New World Translation, the Passion Translation, the Message. If you have questions about that, send me a comment, a text, or a phone call. I'll explain to you why I don't like those translations and why I think they're bad. But again, Mark chapter 5, verses 1 through 20. So right after calming the storm, right, where the disciples are afraid and saying to one another, "Who is this that even the wind and sea obeys him?" They're going to pull up on shore in the morning, right? So then they came to the other side of the sea, into the region of the Gerasenes. And when he got out of the boat, immediately a man from the tombs with an unclean spirit met him, who had his dwelling among the tombs. And no one was able to bind him anymore, even with a chain, because he had often been bound with shackles and chains, and the chains had been torn apart by him, and the shackles broken in pieces. And no one was strong enough to subdue him. And constantly, night and day, among the tombs and in the mountains, he was screaming and gashing himself with stones. And seeing Jesus from a distance, he ran up and bowed down before him, and crying out with a loud voice, he said, "What do I have to do with you, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? I implore you by God, do not torment me." And he had been saying to him, verse 8, for he had been saying to him, "Come out of the man, you unclean spirit." And he was asking him, "What is your name?" And he said to him, "My name is Legion, for we are many." And he began pleading with him earnestly not to send them out of the region. Now there was a large herd of swine feeding nearby on the mountain. And the demons pleaded with him, saying, "Send us into the swine so that we may enter them." And Jesus gave them permission. And coming out, the unclean spirits entered the swine, and the herd rushed down the steep bank into the sea, about 2,000 of them, and they were drowned in the sea. And their herdsmen ran away and reported it in the city and in the countryside, and the people came to see what it was that had happened. And they came to Jesus and observed the demon-possessed man sitting down, clothed, and in his right mind, the very man who had the legion, and they became frightened. And those who had seen it recounted to them how this had happened to the demon-possessed man, and all about the swine. And they began to plead with him to leave their region. And as he was getting into the boat, the man who had been demon-possessed was pleading with him that he might accompany him. And he did not let him, but he said to him, "Go to your people and report to them what great things the Lord has done for you, and how he had mercy on you." And he went away and began to preach in the Decapolis what great things Jesus had done for him, and everyone was marveling. Okay. So in verse 1, the physical location of where we're talking about. Last week I misstepped, and I have a correction to offer because I did more study and got better information. I said they were going from the north of the Sea of Galilee kind of to the middle eastern part of it, which is where the city of Gergesa would be. But after further research, I think they actually went all the way to the southeastern corner of the Sea of Galilee, which is about 13 miles. It's not a super long journey on by boat, but 13 miles is a pretty good distance. So on that, in this translation, it says the region of the Gerasenes, or the country of the Gerasenes. You will sometimes see it as the region or country of the Gadarenes. And so that brings me to something I want to talk to you guys about. There is a textual variant in chapter 5, verse 1. There's actually a number of them, all on the same word. And it's where they were going. Okay? So, for those of you that aren't familiar with this book, this is my Greek New Testament, and I brought it because I want to actually read them to you guys in Greek so you can see how close they are. and see why the variant's there. This is a great example. So one says Gerasenon, right? Gerasenes. One says Gadarenon, Gadarenes. One says Gergesenon, should be Gergesa, the Gergesenes. And the other says Gergustenon, or Geshera, the Gesherites. That area, the Gesherenes. Okay, so there's 4 different variants, or I guess 3 variants, and 1 word that's actually original. I set that book aside because that's the only reason I pulled out my Greek New Testament, so I could read those 4 words to you. So there was a city called Gerasa, which is right up on the Sea of Galilee. There's another one called Gadara, which is about 30 miles southeast of the Sea of Galilee. Then Gergesa, the one I was thinking of last week, is further north and is technically not in the Decapolis. And at the end of this, it says in verse 20 that he went and after being healed, the demoniac went and preached in the Decapolis. So that would make you believe that wherever they were, it was in the area of the Decapolis. And then the region of the Gesherites is a group. It could be. It's unlikely. The most Gerasenes is the most reliable and consistent reading, but we don't know for sure which one is correct. The big idea is that the Decapolis was a region in the southeast. It started in the southeast corner of the Sea of Galilee. It was mostly all east of the Jordan River, and it encompassed an area of 10 cities. They were Greco-Roman cities, right? Deca is 10, polis is city. So Decapolis is literally 10 cities. It's the region of the 10 cities. And so that's pretty well where they made their landfall on the Sea of Galilee, somewhere on that southeast corner of the Sea of Galilee, which was encompassed by this area called the Decapolis. And so with that, they're Greco-Roman cities where when the Roman general Pompey came through, which is actually how Israel came under Roman control, he made a deal with the Hasmonean kings that were in at that time and basically said, I'll help you get rid of your rival, but you're going to become our client kingdom. And they said, hey, okay. And then Pompey founded these cities in this region trying to make a mini Rome in the region of Israel, right? So it's a Gentile area, right? That's why there's a herd of pigs there, because they're Gentiles. They don't follow Jewish law. They don't follow Jewish custom. There would have been still, because that was part of Israel initially, right? There would have still been some Jewish population there. But with all the Greco-Roman influence, it wasn't so Jewish. Okay, so that's your textual variant for the day. Apologetically, sometimes people attack that idea. They're like, well, if it's the Gadarenes, Gadara is 30 miles away. How could they be right on the sea? How could it be right when he got out of the boat? How could the pigs end up in the water so quickly? Well, it could be another place that is right on the sea. That's the short answer. But I draw your attention to that just so you're informed. That way, if someone ever brings it up to you, you know that there's different possibilities out there. Oh, yeah, I remember Luke said there were some textual variants there, and it could be a number of places. We don't know exactly for sure what the right answer is. And I'm not going to tell you. I mean, I'm not dogmatic about it. I don't necessarily choose one of those. I believe the scriptures at face value. If it says they came to the other side of the sea down at the south and they were in this general region, that's where they were. I guess what I'm trying to say is it's not a big deal, even if people want to make it a big deal, right? It doesn't change. And this story is corroborated by Luke in his account, right? So it's not like this is a one-off from Mark. You get the exact same story in Luke's account, I believe, in chapter 8. So I don't get wrapped around the axle on that stuff. I trust God. I believe God. If I was, if you're copying a text and you come across a name you're not familiar with, it'd be really easy to flip a couple letters or to insert a letter somewhere where it didn't belong because you're trying to follow along, but you don't really know the word. Just not that big a deal in my mind. Okay, so that covers verse 1. When they came to the other side of the sea, they were in the country of the Gerasenes, or the Gadarenes. You'll often hear this referred to as Jesus and the Gadarene demoniac. All right, verses 2 through 5. As we get into this story, I want you to understand that Mark's writing is a little bit clunky. He gives amplifying information mixed in with the narrative. So he says, Jesus got out of the boat and the man from the tomb met him. And then later he says the man came to him and Jesus had been saying, get out of him. And then Jesus asked his name, right? And it seems it's just kind of clunky. So don't get confused by that, right? Don't, just recognize that for what it is and try not to be so rigid in following the text. Don't misunderstand me when I say that. Obviously, what's in the text is what happened, but it's like Mark has a whole lot on his mind, and he provides a great amount of detail. A previous exorcism, Mark wrote 3 verses, and here he writes 20. So he's just trying to get it all on paper. And so just don't let that trip you up too much. So Jesus gets out of the boat, and this possessed man comes to meet him. This man with an unclean spirit or with a demon. I think those two terms are synonymous. Unclean spirit and demon. I don't think they're two separate things. There's discussion out there about that. But he comes to meet Jesus, right? And let's talk about the man himself before we even get into him meeting Jesus. So he lives among the tombs, right? So this guy literally lives in a graveyard. So that's not a good thing, right? Nobody wants to live in a graveyard. Nobody in their right mind. So that's one clue for us. We already know he's not in his right mind. At the end, we read that he's clothed and in his right mind, which implies, 1, he was a little bit nutty. He was out, right? He was crazy. And 2, he was naked. So living in a graveyard, completely naked, by yourself, says he could not be bound, right? That they had tried to bind him before in shackles and chains, and he broke the chains and broke the shackles in pieces. So somehow, either by sheer adrenaline or by the demonic power from what was possessing him, he was able to have supernatural strength where they couldn't hold him down, right? They couldn't keep him under control, is the whole idea. And he's constantly, night and day, he's crying out and screaming, and he's gashing himself, he's cutting himself with rocks. And that could be, on the arms, on the chest, on the legs, wherever. But whatever it is that's happening to this man, the demons within him are causing him to not care to be clothed, to scream constantly, to live in the graveyard with all the dead bodies, and to be continuously harming himself. And even when they try, the citizens of the area try to bind him and hold him down, he, without regard to his own health or physical condition, he breaks the chains, breaks the shackles, he's completely lost his humanity, so to speak. Yes, he's still a man, but there's nothing about him that makes him seem like a man other than his appearance at this point. Right? It's really a very sad situation. It's a terrible, ugly picture that's been painted for us of how this man is living and how he's being treated in life, right? He's isolated because of his behavior. He's isolated because of the society. They don't want him around, so they've run him out of town. He's just utterly alone, other than the demons inside him, which we'll get to in a moment. I want to remind everyone that in Mark chapter 3, right, which was not long ago, Jesus, in speaking of the unforgivable sin, tells us that he came to bind the strong man. Okay, and this is, by example, the quintessential strong man. It literally says he could not be bound, and Jesus comes to bind him. Okay, so think about this. Just follow logically. Jesus says he came to bind the strong man so that he could plunder his home. And then he gave some parables about the kingdom. And then Jesus calms the storm. He controls nature and the sea, which nobody could do but God. And now he's going to bind the man that is stronger than everyone else, the man that cannot be bound. Well, we're going to see that in a minute, but I just want to put that in your head. And again, Mark is driving us to a question. Who is Jesus of Nazareth? So in verses 6 through 8, we read that this man runs up to Jesus and bows before him. Okay, some translations say he worshipped. The idea is that he got on his knees and literally bowed down before Jesus. I don't know if this was an act of worship. I don't know if this was an acknowledgement of who Jesus is. It's hard to say. We're not given that much information on it. The commentators are fairly split on this. Some people say it was like an attempt to thwart Jesus' authority. Some say it was actual worship. And honestly, I don't really know the right answer on that. I don't have a strong opinion other than the text says that he ran up and bowed down before Jesus. And what I can say in verse 7, when he cries out with a loud voice, "What do I have to do with you, Jesus, Son of the Most High God?" He is absolutely acknowledging who Jesus is and trying to run him off, right? Talked about it before in Mark chapter 1. The demon-possessed man in Mark chapter 1 and verse 24 asked the exact same question. What do I have to do with you, Jesus? And I talked to you guys then about David and how he would look at his nephews and say, "What do I have to do with you, you sons of..." and now I can't remember her name. But it was his sister, right? He's, "What do I have to do with you, you sons of..." That's going to drive me nuts now. What is her name? Anyway, so sorry, I got to look now. Zeruiah. What do I have to do with you, you sons of Zeruiah? Sorry, I had to look that up. That was going to drive me nuts if I didn't. But again, the demon-possessed man asked Jesus the same thing. What do I have to do with you? As in, you don't belong here? This is my territory? I don't associate with your type? It is a rebuke of sorts. The demons are trying to run Jesus off. But then notice the demon also says, "I implore you," or "I adjure you by God, do not torment me. Same thing that the demon asked in Mark chapter 1. Are you here to torture me? And so it gives us an interesting insight into demons, right? James says, you believe God is one, you do well, for even the demons believe and shudder. And the idea there is the demons know who God is, and they know that their time's limited. What they did not seem to know anything about the first coming of Christ, but they seem quite familiar with the second coming, that Jesus is going to cast them out into the abyss, right? We call it hell, right? The lake of fire that's been prepared for the devil and his angels. And so this demon says, please don't torture me. I beg you, by God, don't torture me. He knows that one day he will be tormented and Jesus will be at the hand of it, right? It will be at Jesus' hand that he's tortured. And it says, he asked that for Jesus had been saying to him, come out of the man, you unclean spirit. And I don't read that to be a failed exorcism attempt, just that Jesus commanded the demon to come out of the man, or the demons to come out of the man. And then Mark gives us some amplifying information. And notice all this is in the past present, right? It's weird in English. He had been saying to him, and then in verse 9, and Jesus was asking him, and he was asking him, and the demon said to him. So Jesus asked him what his name is. And the demon replies, Legion, for we are many. So when you hear the word legion, in this context, right, in the first century AD, in the Roman world, if someone said legion, the first thought you would have would be the Roman legions, right? That's the division of the army. And one legion of Roman soldiers was between 4,000 and 6,000 men, depending on where they were and how much battle they had been in lately and that sort of thing. But generally, the standard was it was about 6,000. Just imagine that, right? We read right after the Mount of Transfiguration, we read about this child that's possessed by one demon that causes the boy to fall into the fire. And this guy is possessed by, I don't know that Mark is necessarily trying to give us an exact number. I asked my wife yesterday, I said, so how many demons inhabited the Gadarene demoniac? And she's like, right? And the answer is a legion. And so that could mean there were literally 6,000 demons possessing this man. It could just be that Mark is trying to paint for the picture of us a great number. When they go into the swine, it said that there were about 2,000. So maybe it was 2,000 demons. Maybe it was 3 demons per pig. Don't really know. Don't know that it really matters. The idea is that part of the reason this man is so crazed and so out of control is because he was left utterly helpless because there were so many, right? So in verses 10 through 13, the legion starts pleading with Jesus, don't send us out of the region. Don't cast us out, right? And I think of don't cast us into the lake of fire. Don't send us into the abyss. But Mark writes that don't send us out of the region. And then there's a large herd of swine feeding on the mountain, and they say, send us into the swine, send us into the pigs, let us possess the pigs. And notice Jesus gives them permission. The demons can only do what God permits. Jesus permitted them to go into the swine. Now, I think, so the unclean spirits go into the swine and then send the swine off the steep bank into the sea, and they're drowned. I think the demons thought that they were getting over on Jesus. Like, okay, we're going to have him send us into the swine. We'll run the swine off the cliff. That'll scare everyone, and they'll send him away, and hey, we've still got the chaos in our Gentile area, right? We've still got the chaos here in the region. But in verses 14 through 17, that's what we read about, right? The report goes into town and around the countryside of what had happened, and the townspeople come to check it out. And they find the man who was possessed by the legion of demons is now clothed and in his right mind, right? Sitting at the feet of Jesus. And so they become very afraid, and as a result, they ask Jesus to leave. They're like, killed 2,000 of our pigs. Just go, right? That's no small event. A herd of 2,000 pigs, that's a lot of chow. That's a whole bunch of bacon. And it probably costs someone a year of wages or more. And so they just ask him to leave. And in verses 18 through 20, we see that Jesus respects their wishes. You know, if you ask Jesus to get out of your life, he'll go. And that should be a very scary reality to all of us. He is the God that created all things, the God of the universe. If you ask him to leave you alone and go away, he will. So to speak, God's will and God's purposes will be served. So in verses 18 through 20, we see the now sane man wants to accompany Jesus, right? And it's quite possible that this was a Gentile. He may have been a Jew. We're not told. But Jesus' primary ministry was to Israel, to the Jews. And Jesus won't let him come with him. How often do we read in the Bible about someone asking to follow Jesus and Jesus says no? It's not very common, right? But in this situation, Jesus says no. Go back and go through the area of the Decapolis, go home to your people and tell them the great things the Lord has done to you and how he has had mercy on you. And the man goes, if you read in verse 20, he goes and preaches through the whole Decapolis what Jesus had done for him. And so in this passage, we have two places where Mark attests to the deity of Christ. One, where the demon refers to Jesus as the Son of God Most High. And the second, where Jesus tells the man, go and report what the Lord did to you, and he reports what Jesus did for him. I told you guys at the outset that a lot of people say Mark never talks about the deity of Christ, and I was going to try to point them out as we go along. There's two of them in one account, one story, and I love it. I think it's great. So, what does this tell us about God? It tells us a couple things about God. One, he is merciful and kind. God showed mercy on this man. He had compassion on him who had been afflicted by so many evil spirits. And that God, in his mercy and his grace and his love for people, set him free from those chains. You know, the man before was chained and broke the chains. But now, the man is set free of the chains of possession by wickedness. And second, God is in control of all things. I say that a lot. I feel like a broken record sometimes, but the evil spirits could only do what God permitted them to do. So then we ask, how does this point me to Jesus? And I say again, it should leave us asking the question, who is Jesus of Nazareth? The wind and the seas obey him. The demons obey him. The demons proclaim he is the Son of God. And it points us toward Jesus in all those ways. The story reports to us that Jesus can transform us from crazed, depraved people into calm and reverent people. Jesus is the greatest gift ever given to mankind. God sent his only Son as Jesus of Nazareth to live a perfect, sinless life and sacrifice himself on Calvary's cross so that we could be offered freedom from sin, uncleanness, demon possession, wickedness, so that we could live righteous lives. Not that we will ever live the righteous life that Jesus lived, but so that we're given the option, the ability to pursue righteousness, to seek after God and his kingdom. This text tells us that Jesus can transform us. Right? And that's what Paul says in Romans, that we are to be transformed into the image of Christ. As Christians, as believers, our goal in life should be to be made more like Christ. We should seek to emulate him, his behavior, his attitude, the mercy he shows us. And think about this. The demons thought that by going into the pigs and running them off into the sea and getting Jesus asked to leave the region, that they were going to stop the spread of Jesus' good news. And nay. Jesus will not permit that to happen. Instead, this man goes into the Decapolis, this one man, and preaches the good news to everybody. So that the next time we see Jesus in the Decapolis, they're waiting for him. They want him there. They've heard what he can do for them. So what do we do with this? How do we apply it to our lives? Never underestimate what God can do with one man or with one woman, with one person. We're told to go and make disciples of all the nations. And this man is evidence to us that the personal testimony of one person can change the attitude of an entire region. And I say that to tell you, your personal testimony of what Jesus has done in your life is powerful. It can be your contribution to the kingdom of God. Go tell people, not just about Jesus. Don't just, give them your canned, this is the gospel, you're a sinner, you need grace. That's all true. And that's all good things that we should be sharing with people. But especially in the modern world, the current generation, our kids, our grandkids, young people coming up today are seeking someone who is authentic. They don't want to hear a sales pitch. They don't want you to give them the Romans road. They want to hear what Jesus did for you. Okay? It's personal. They want a close connection with someone because they've spent their whole lives where their only connections with other people are through electronic communication on their phones and on the internet. And now they're seeking that personal experience. Tell them your personal experience. Tell them how Jesus changed your life. And I know a lot of people that think, well, I've got a boring testimony. I didn't find Jesus when I was laying in a gutter with a needle hanging out of my arm. Well, praise God. I didn't either. That's not where I was when I found Jesus. But I found Jesus when I was at a point in my life where my highest priority was where my next beer was, and I was thinking about getting a girlfriend because I wasn't happy with my wife. Turns out what was wrong with my life wasn't her, it was me. That's where I found Jesus. And just that honesty, being willing to admit that you weren't perfect, you weren't great, and you found him anyway. That's powerful. There's something else that this exorcism teaches us, that there's nobody that's too far gone. You meet people and they say, man, God could never forgive me with all the things I've done. Wrong. Wrong. This guy had 6,000 demons. If God can rescue that, he can rescue you. Okay? And if you are a Christian, go tell people about it. And get personal. Don't just put on your church face and go preach your memorized sermon. Don't just tell people about how God has been kind to you. Be real with them, especially if you're speaking to a younger person. These younger people, they come in the church, and what's their biggest complaint? The church is full of hypocrites. Well, yes, that's because the church is full of sinners. But we need to be willing to open up and tell them the ugly truth of our lives. Okay? And if you're truly saved, you will see your life before salvation and see where you needed salvation. Explain that to them. Go tell people what the Lord has done for you and how he has shown you mercy. I feel like that's always my message, that's always my application, but I mean, that is the great commandment given to us by God, right? Or by Jesus at his ascension, to go and make disciples of the world. We call it the Great Commission. We've all been commissioned to be missionaries. So if you guys have questions or comments for me, please get them to me. Put them in the comments in the video. I accept rebukes. I know there were a couple places today where I said I don't know, or I'm not sure. And you know, some people have a problem with that. Some people are sure about everything. I'm just not. Especially when it comes to the things of God. I'm just not willing to be sure about things that I can't be sure of. So if you don't like me saying I don't know what to tell you. Sorry. So please, rebukes. Like I say, I like a good rebuke. I like to be told when I'm wrong. My responsibility to you is to teach the scriptures faithfully. Your responsibility to me is when I'm wrong to tell me I'm wrong. So I accept those. That's not just something I say. I actually, I really do appreciate it when someone can offer me correction. I'd rather know I'm wrong. And if I am wrong, I will announce it on the next video. Because if I receive correction somewhere, now I've put out something that wasn't good, and I will correct it on the next video. So thank you guys for going through this study with me. Thank you for following along. And I hope you guys have a wonderful day. May God bless you all.